the first one to tell you. I was like, okay, like just spit it out. Like, what is it? And he was like, you booked The Chosen. When you're out there and you're immersing yourself into that culture, I mean, it's dark at times.
Is that kind of where the story is going, where you're getting closer to Peter?
And then it'll say the name. And I look at the appointment name and it says, The Jesus Revolution. And then I go, like, if you're, Jonathan in his position, or even Peter or John or any of those guys, you would be like doing like,
Any chance you're going to be in the Acts spinoff whenever they do that?
Ruslan.
Hey, before we get into this video, do me a huge favor. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you hit that like button. Huge percentage of you guys that watch don't subscribe or like. And we're now on podcast platforms. So if you're just listening to this or you're on one of the other platforms, make sure you leave a review and you're following there. That helps out a ton. We're trying to make sure that we spread out the content for you guys. All right, let's jump into this video. And you said your grandfather was the one who was the pastor?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's
yeah,
awesome.
Yeah.
And so have they seen any of your previous work?
They have.
What do they think?
So before my grandfather had his diagnosis, which happened in 2020, he was like my biggest support system. He was like a father figure to me. So for me, I think the biggest thing was, it's so funny because I think like in the very, very beginning, like when I first started, because I started like when I was younger, not really much stuff was kind of happening for me and for my career. And so my grandparents were supportive, but there was still like an underlining kind of feeling of like, why are you doing this? And it was more so from my grandma's perspective.
In terms of just like having an issue with the entertainment industry?
Yeah, the entertainment industry. And I think just like overall, like just, the rejection, there's a whole kind of level of rejection. And also like for me too, I was still in public school growing up until 7th grade. And so when all that stuff was kind of happening, I had still been doing sports. And there was a point in time where I hit a crossroad where I almost chose, soccer was my main sport. Okay. So I almost chose soccer over acting. And I ended up, making that decision that I was going to fully pursue acting and that was going to be my profession. But there was a good point where I almost did not do that. And it's just really crazy how it all kind of like came to be. Like just, I've been kind of reflecting on my life, like just of late, like even like when I went to go see The Chosen for the first time with Nat, it was just
That's your
so
first time
surreal.
seeing yourself on a big screen?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah, it was just surreal, man. I started crying.
Yeah.
I started crying. We have been going and watching like all these different flicks and stuff like that. And so, the last one we saw was like S.D.N.Y. And like we're watching like A-list, people up there and stuff like that. And it's just a weird thing when then all of a sudden you see your face on there.
Sure.
I mean, it was always weird like seeing myself on TV and stuff like that too. But then like ultimately knowing now like my face is up on the big screen with some of these other guys, it's just pretty surreal.
So you've done The Rookie. What else have you done that we may be familiar with?
The Rookie. I've done NCIS.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I've worked on Young Sheldon.
Okay.
That's probably like the one that like I guess prior to The Chosen people would know me from because I would have like a lot of interactions with Sheldon. What else? I would say those are probably the more like recognizable names.
Got it.
As of right now, but I've done a lot of other like guest spots and recurring.
How long has this been like a full-time thing for you?
So it's a complicated story, but basically the shortened version is started when I was 1, went till I was about 3, took a little hike.
Pampers commercial? What are you doing at 1,
yeah. Honestly, it was a lot of like modeling stuff. It was like a lot of like print work and stuff like that. My parents had like stuck me into doing and stuff like that. And then I took like a little like Michael Jordan like retirement and then did sports.
Okay.
I did sports.
You wouldn't play baseball?
No, that I did not do. So I didn't do baseball, but I did soccer and basketball. Those were my 2 sports. But soccer was my biggest one. And I did that for a long time. Then my sister had kind of came around. She was born. She ended up wanting to do acting as well.
And you guys are in California at this time? Or
yeah.
So
I was born and raised in Orange County.
Okay, got it.
So I was born and raised there. And so, yeah, my sister wanted to do it. And so she ended up getting involved in it. And to give like a little bit of context, my mom and my dad, how they met in an acting school. And so,
this is generational for you guys.
Yeah. I mean, kind of in a way. It's funny though, because like the reality is that my mom has like major stage fright, and like she like, I don't even know why she even went to that school to begin with, but she ended up going. There was like a really, really strict school for like Meisner, and I guess like you weren't allowed to like date when you were in that school. Like there was like a lot of like stipulations and rules, and like they kind of like kept it like hush hush and stuff like that. And then they ended up getting married. My dad had continued on. My mom, like I said, had stage fright, so she like didn't continue on.
Yeah.
He back in like the 80s, 90s, my dad's like fair skinned like me. And so he speaks fluent Spanish. I don't. But he kind of, was in that weird space at that point in time where there was, not many opportunities, I would say, as it is now, like in terms of the accepting culture of, hey, speaking Spanish, and then also not looking the part that they want you to portray. Sure. And so there was a lot of opportunities where he just was not, getting. And it was solely because of the fact that there was just kind of
different time.
Different time. It was It was a different time. And so it didn't really work out for him. So he ended up having to kind of like shift gears. And
but your mom and dad both dreamed of being actors?
Not my mom.
Okay, but mainly your dad.
But I think that from what I understand from my mom had like major like stage fright, major like anxiety in front of people. And I think that it was more so of like, because like there's a lot of people too that I know that will take it just in terms of like, even like for like somebody like yourself, like doing like podcasting and stuff like that to kind of get themselves out there to like, put themselves in a tricky environment where they're like in front of like 30 or 40 other people and having to do like Shakespearean things or, whatever the case may be, to kind of get themselves acclimated to that. I think that was more of the purpose of why she did that for herself, to kind of like get herself out there. For my dad, that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to pursue that, but it obviously didn't kind of.
What year was this? This 90s, 2007?
Yeah. It was like early 90s.
Okay, that's a way different time.
Yeah. Way different time. Yeah. Which like I mean like now we have streaming, we have all this crazy stuff, which is like
it's like everything has changed now. Where like in the 80s and 90s, I'd say the 2000s, the things were more ubiquitous. So culture was tapped into, everyone's kind of into one thing. So when you have a massive blockbuster, everyone was paying attention to that thing. Yeah. Now there's way more opportunity. There's way more people making a living. There's way more people, whether it's media, art, news, movies, films, series, way more. But nothing is as ubiquitous as it once was. So I can't even imagine like how do you like as a comedian, if you're trying to crack jokes, right? Like how do you make a reference that everyone in the audience gets today? Because everything is so segmented. I think it's ultimately for the good. Like I think
for sure.
my background's in music, and so like I think there's, I want to say over 2 or 3 million people now making a full-time living in music.
It's crazy,
right? Which is wild to think about. But nothing is like the closest you'd get to like a ubiquitous moment in music would be like a Kendrick Lamar, They Not Like Us,
sure,
moment.
Sure.
Yeah,
right.
But those don't really even happen like that anymore, right? Like that was, and that was on the back of like beef and drama. But I don't know where everything goes from here. I think it goes to more segmented pockets of audiences, and serving those audiences, and then hoping those audiences do the work of like evangelizing your content, right? So like The Chosen becomes a vehicle for people to share, to get people to plug into the world, the universe of The Chosen. But will it ever be like the way, I don't know, like Bad Boys was in the 90s. This is probably before your time, where like everybody talked about Bad Boys 1 and 2. It was a moment. Or Rush Hour. It was a moment.
Yeah. These blockbuster films.
Yes. Like I don't know if we'll ever have that again.
Yeah, I think that streaming is a completely different beast now, what we're dealing with. I mean, like, I think that you've even talked about it in a lot of your content as well, about like talking about how like this is a day and age where like there's so many people that get famous now that like you can't even appreciate like people being famous now, because like there's so many people that are able to utilize social media as platforms to kind of break themselves. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's just a different era. We're living in a completely different media now.
Do you feel, as someone that is an actor who has this is a craft for you, right? My first question, so two-part question. One would be do you feel any sort of burden to have to be a social media influencer to make sure that you're staying relevant, to keep getting gigs?
Yeah.
And or are there times where actors who this is their craft are getting passed over for the influencer TikToker? Like in my day, it used to be the rappers that got the roles and people would be upset.
Yeah.
You know, but then out of that, like you got Tupac and Ice Cube, you got some pretty good actors out of it. But now it's like, I wonder if there are folks that aren't really actors, but they're landing roles because they have a big following.
Totally.
And they kind of suck. And then like an actor who's like, this is my craft, dude. Like my father was into this. My mother was into this. This is my thing. Yeah. So two-part question. So pressure of social media to be relevant and visible. And then two, are there social media people that have no acting chops or minimal acting chops taking potential work?
Yeah. I mean, to answer your question, yes, that is the big thing that we're dealing with right now in this day and age. Look, I think it's one of these things where, you know, we'll kind of dive into, you know, more of the spiritual element for me. But like, I think right now where I'm at, I'm so secure in my faith with Christ that like, I know that there's enough opportunities to go around. And I look at it from the standpoint of whatever God deems right for me, he can't take that away from me. And so, you know, it's just really crazy even to kind of even think about like how I've even gotten to this point to The Chosen too. Cause like, you know, yeah, I've seen it in waves. Like I've seen it from like when I was a kid and what I started doing and friends that I've, you know, been doing it with for all these years. It's just, we've seen media expand like right before our eyes. And even for me too, because of the fact knowing that like social media was birthed like in the middle of me when I was in middle school. Like I remember, you know, friends, family members, my sister of all people, you know, begging, download Instagram, please get an Instagram, make an Instagram. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that crap. Like I don't want to do that. I want to do that. And then like, you know, finally, you know, you do that, but it's because it's part of the movement of the culture of like what the culture is like doing and stuff like that. And so I think like, you know, and I'm kind of veering off a little bit, but like now in this day and age, it's been really interesting for me because I've been having to really center myself and do everything against what the culture is doing.
Okay. Is that because of your faith?
Yeah, I would say so. 1,000,000%.
So in what way? So like the culture is going this way and Nick is going, I have to go the opposite way where the culture is.
Yeah,
Give me an example.
Yeah, I think like for me, like, you know, the biggest thing that we can get lost in is like, you know, like I said, I grew up in Orange County, then I, you know, uprooted my life out to LA to pursue, you know, acting, you know, full time. When you're out there and you're immersing yourself into that culture, I mean, it's dark at times, you know, like when you're out there. I mean, not that there isn't hope, not that there isn't light, but like, you know, see, okay, there's so many aspects to it because even like when I first moved out to LA, this was all before COVID.
Okay.
The landscape in which the industry was before COVID, completely different than what it is now. So like the landscape now is like, or actually let's go back. So before, like when I first moved out there, a typical day in the life of an actor, or at least for me, was you know, Monday would come, you'd have auditions in your inbox, and you know, they would be appointments where you would actually go to these studios, you'd go to these casting, you know, departments, offices, and you'd actually audition for them in person.
Okay.
And you know, then sometimes you'd get callbacks, then, you know, the following week you didn't have to go back, read for the same material, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And the weeks would go on and on and on. And I mean, I would be slammed, you know, week in to week out. I mean, just with material, just that you'd be honestly getting like just drowning in.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you memorizing this or are you reading?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it would be, yeah, you'd have to memorize it, or if you weren't memorizing it, you'd have to bring the scripts in with you, and then I would just like basically like highlight them and then like go in there, and I'd be like, playing the moments with that person. Or if I'm like, if you're the reader, with me, I'd be having to read my lines here and just be like, kind of just like.
Well, I'm just curious how much of this you have to memorize versus go in and just read.
Yeah, I mean, they don't. I mean, look, I mean, they can't like truly expect you to go in there if they're like giving you like 2 days notice to like 8 pages and you're having to cry and do all this crazy, like material. Also like, for like, to give an example, like if it was like you're reading for one of the main characters in The Chosen, right? And you're going in for what they would usually call like pre-reads. They would be really understanding of the fact that you are most likely not going to have all the material memorized if they're giving you like 8 pages worth of dialogue and you're playing Jesus, like in Jonathan's position, right? And he's going in there, he has all these monologues and he has all this word and verbiage and, specificity. First off, like even in a position like that for playing Jesus, like there's so much that you have to get right, even with that, behind all of that. So that would be kind of like that. Now, let's just say he gets a call back, Jonathan Rumi. And he has, let's just say maybe he's had like a week with it. They're going to expect you to at least be familiar with the material where he can be off the page and he can be able to just have a connection here with you and then like organically be able to play moments. If he needs to glance down at the, at the lines, then he can, but ultimately, they're going to be expecting that. And then like, if we take it a step further, like there used to be like a point in time where it would be like if you're, Jonathan in his position, or even Peter or John or any of those guys, you would be like doing like 6, 7 callbacks just to like get to the very, very end where it'd be between like you and a couple of people.
That's brutal, man.
Oh, yeah, and the reason why they would do that.
So you're saying like there's just a grind there that's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And like again, like this is like every audition, so it's not like okay, like for example, like for like some of the things that I've done in the past, like the very first job I ever booked was a Nickelodeon show called Sam and Cat with Ariana Grande and Jenna McCurdy. Had a couple of lines in that. That one, I went in once and then I booked it. But that was only because it was a couple of lines. Now, next time around, I get another Nickelodeon audition for a series I ended up doing after that called Belle and the Bulldogs. Belle and the Bulldogs, I was a recurring character, appeared in 20 episodes of 40 in 2 seasons. And for that process, it was, well, that one was crazy because we had done, I had read for every single male character that was of the main characters before I even got to my role I ended up booking.
Wow.
So I read for, there was like 3 male characters. I think it was Troy, Sawyer, and Newt. And I read for all 3 of them. And I ended up getting callbacks for a lot of them. Then they all like kind of died. Didn't hear anything about it. Then I ended up coming back in for another male character that was not a series reg. And series regular is like one of the main leads. But he was a recurring character, so he would be more featured. And his name was Ace McFumbles. I got pinned for that. Then I got released. Basically, what a pin means is there's a heavy interest in you, and there's maybe 1 or 2 others that are also getting pinned, or they'll also call it a veil. And they'll basically narrow down their option between those 2 or 3 people.
That sounds rough, man. And it sounds like an emotional roller coaster. So for you, what did the faith come before the acting? And is that what's driving you to be willing to commit to this process for this long? Or did the faith come after the acting? Like, what is driving you to do all this?
Yeah, no, it wasn't. It was, so to give like context, my grandfather was a minister pastor for 38 years. Right. I got all this factually checked yesterday when I saw him. Yeah, he had really set a really good foundation within the family household that like, there's faith, I have faith, but I never really was taught faith in my household. So I knew it existed. I knew that it was a thing that was talked about, but it was all kind of like mud and water. Like it didn't really make a whole lot of sense. I knew about, the different stories, David and Goliath, Jesus, the birth.
The greatest hits.
Yeah, the greatest hits. Yes, exactly. Knew all of that, but I didn't really understand what it all meant.
Okay.
One of the biggest things that I actually remember thinking about is I remember that he would always talk about my grandfather, how he could hear the voice of God and how he, was so spiritually in tune with him. I never knew what that meant. And that always, as a kid, like, not haunted me, but it always like rang really loud in me. And I never knew what that meant. And even if I ever asked my parents, they didn't know. And so it was a real journey for me. Like, yes, I had faith. Yes, I would have my, grandfather praying for me and different things like that. But I truly didn't know anything. And I didn't grow up in any kind of school system where it was taught, as well.
Did your parents go to church?
They did. So it's really interesting. So many full circle things have happened. So growing up in Orange County, I went to 2 churches. Greg Laurie.
Oh, yeah.
And my grandfather.
Okay.
And it wasn't consistent, but those were the 2 churches that I used to go to. For my grandfather specifically, we always went for the classic hits. Easter, Christmas, Thanksgiving, different ones. And then for Greg Laurie, it was very sporadic, but I was always going to Pastor Laurie's church, and I saw the evolution.
Have you connected with Pastor Laurie since?
No.
Oh, yeah. He's a friend.
Yeah. I would love to. I would love to. And it's crazy because there's a full circle tie with all of this that is just really, really crazy to me. But how actually I found faith for me. But there was a whole, phase in which that, like I said, I didn't really know about faith. I didn't really understand, and nor did I really care to know. And so I kind of the one thing that I always did know though growing up was that whenever I would enter Greg Laurie's church, when I would enter my grandfather's church, I always felt at peace as a kid. That's the only thing I knew. I always felt comfortable there. For me also as a kid, I hated going into the Sunday school services. I hated being with the other kids. I don't know what it was. I always felt
to go to big church.
Yeah, I always felt like I always felt like a big kid. I always wanted to listen to them preach.
Yeah.
And even though I didn't understand what they were talking about, I still felt like, now I look back on it, it was the presence of God there, but it just wasn't ringing loud enough for me at that point. And so, time goes on, I'm pursuing, acting, sports, all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't later until really COVID that's when it hit me the hardest. And that's when I then, was forced to find my faith. So to kind of bring the point home. So to what we were talking about with the auditioning process and all that kind of stuff. There was a point in time where there's so many factors within this industry. They're so fascinating, but at that particular point in time when I was talking to you about that Nickelodeon series that I was doing, I was, I think, 15 years old when I got cast into that. But there is a thing for young adults that there's stipulations and rules on work labor laws for children to, work only a certain amount of hours, and then they have to, go out, they have to do a certain amount of schooling, blah, blah, blah. Well, when you turn, I believe it's 15 and a half or 16 years old, there is a test that you can take as a young adult that basically solidifies you. It's called the Chespy test that allows you to basically work as an adult, somebody who's 18 plus. And that now means that productions don't have to hire an on-set teacher to accompany you and to watch over you, as well as have to do school. Now that's your burden that you have to take on. So there was a point in time where I was debating on whether I was going to take that test or not, because the industry at that point in time was basically only hiring actors who basically had that.
Yeah, but kind of pressuring you a little bit to
yeah.
be, for them to be more efficient.
Yes,
Yeah.
and also cost effective,
Yes.
you know, for them. And so I was really kind of debating it, but I had prolonged it for so long and kind of like, you know, was just like, no, that the 2 years just went by. And then I turned 18. But it was such a grueling time because there were so many projects that I was up for that I didn't get because of the fact that it all came down to, oh wait, is he legal 18? Sorry.
Yeah.
We're going to take that back. And so that happened like, you know, a lot of times. And then I just remember that I would always tell my friends, because there came a point like where like it just got dark for me because like, you know, I had been working, but it wasn't like really consistent. Like I was working like a little bit, I was doing things here and there. But I don't know what it was. Like I think there came a point where I got really antsy and I was like, I want to do something. And so I had cobbled up a lot of, you know, my good acting buddies and stuff, and I started making shorts films with them.
Okay.
And we had done like a couple of them and stuff like that. And I remember there was a buddy of mine in particularly who I was like writing these shorts with and stuff like that, and he stuck me in as one of the leading roles. And he doesn't know this, but like for me, like it meant everything to me at that point in time, because everything that I was doing at that point, I was basically like getting so close to the end for all these great jobs that could have, you know, changed or altered my career, and it didn't. And the fact that he stuck me there, he was like, because we were writing it, and I never even like when I was writing some of this stuff with him, I was never like in the intention of being like, you know, attention, you know, grabber and be like, oh, I want to be the lead, I want to be the whatever, you know. I just was more so just wanting to get behind the camera and even also expand my knowledge. You know, what's it like being a director? What's it like being a producer? What's it like, you know, really submersing myself into that kind of world? And then the fact that, you know, like when we were writing it, he was like, you know, I'm writing this for you to, you know, be the lead. And I was like, really? And it was kind of like a really cool moment. But I remember like when we finally did those films and stuff like that, I remember I ended up telling my friends, because I started finding like a sense of like purpose again. I was like, when I turn 18, everything's going to change for me and for my life. And when I ended up saying that, sure enough, June comes around, my birthday, turn 18, slew of auditions come in, and then book. And it just started free flowing in. And I booked Young Sheldon, NCIS, you know, just all these shows, you know, I booked a commercial, I booked, you know, all these different kinds of things. And it was like back to back. And that's where like my whole kind of career had like kind of shifted.
Now, was it because of those short films that you guys were doing?
No, I just think that
just gave
like
you the confidence.
Yeah, I feel like I think like work begets work, and so like I feel like when I kind of did those shorts, I kind of like got like an understanding of that. Yes, the confidence thing was like.
Were you guys putting them on YouTube, or what were you doing with them?
We were gonna do a festival circuit with them, but then we didn't.
How well produced were they? Are they like you guys shooting them on DSLRs or like full on crews and the whole thing?
Yeah, we had some. I mean, we had some pretty good stuff. I mean, it wasn't like terrible. And funny enough, like all of our buddies who were a part of it, like they're all working actors now.
That's awesome.
And it was funny because it was like right before we all like launched our careers.
That's dope. Well, I like how you said work begets work. I also think of Proverbs says that humility precedes honor. So many people want to be platformed and want to have the thing, but they're not willing to humble themselves and get in the dirt and learn every aspect of it. And so you were willing just to walk through that process without the expectation of being the lead.
Yeah.
And then that all of a sudden sets you up in a variety of practical ways, but I also think your heart being changed to like, I don't need to be the guy. I'm willing to be the guy behind the camera. And sure enough, you become the guy in front of the camera.
And it was really interesting too, because like I've always had like aspirations of like, you know, wanting to direct and to produce and to do those kinds of things outside of that. So yeah, I mean, like for me, it was a really, really interesting thing how it all kind of like played out, because then now here I am being offered by my friend, you know, hey, you're gonna be the lead of the short that we're writing together, and I'm like, oh, okay, like that's cool. You know, and he also was a little bit older than me too. So like he was like kind of like an older brother figure to me.
And this is all in Orange County, LA? Where
no,
you guys
no,
at?
this was now, I was already now in LA. I was fully in LA. There was a point in time where I was driving back and forth from Orange County to Los Angeles for like 8 to 10 years. And then we were finally not crazy enough to do that anymore. And so then I finally moved out to,
That's awesome.
to LA.
So when did your faith start to develop more and more? Is it after that?
Yeah. So basically, you know, when all of this stuff started happening, and it's just really funny how like God works, because I think that this was on purpose for sure. Like all this stuff started happening for me, you know, like I said, like I'm going to start working, you know, when I'm 18, started happening, started working on this, that, you know, Dollface, this, that, you know, all these projects, the Rookie, you know, all this different stuff. COVID happens. And it felt like my whole life just like changed. And I mean, honestly, I mean, it was like that for everybody, not just me, but it felt like, you know, for me personally, it felt like my whole life changed. My work life changed, my personal life changed, just everything. Even my family dynamic changed. Everything just changed. And slowly but surely, everything that I ever clinged on to, or that I was so like married to, I guess in a way, all left me. Money, friends, you know, family, like just different things. And it just felt like calamity was just like fully submersing me in my life. And there came a point where for me, you know, that resulted into so what ended up happening was my sister ended up booking a job that had to take her to Canada. And so she was still underage at that point. My father ended up going with her to Canada for like 7-8 months. And so it was just me and my mom during COVID. And so I was having to kind of like take care of her and stuff like that. And she was kind of like deathly afraid of like going out there. She was like the crazy one stocking up on all the toilet paper and stuff like that. So if anybody was trying to stock up on toilet paper, that was her.
That was your mom.
That was her.
Taking it all the time.
That was her. Yeah, it was just one of those things where like it was just so bleak, and it was just like us two, and I wanted to get out of the house so desperately that I would, funny enough, of all the places that I tried to escape growing up, which was Orange County, I ended up reverting back to Orange County, and I went and was hanging out with some buddies of mine from school, and, you know, started getting into the wrong things, started drinking, you know, smoking, you know, resulting to, you know, drugs and other supplements that just are not good for me and for my life, and just kind of delved into that for, you know, a period of time. And I remember one moment in particularly, it got really bad where I just got, you know, sick one night. Just was, you know, basically right next to the toilet. I was just like, you know, really, really bad. And I remember when I had went through all of that stuff, I had also found out about my grandfather's diagnosis, about him getting brain cancer. And for me, you know, he's always been like a father figure to me and has taught me so much. And I think like the person that I am today resembles a lot of him. And so that was also another factor. And it's so funny because if there was ever even a sense of me like believing in God or anything like that, that all went out the window when that happened. Because I was thinking to myself, like, if God really is real, why would he let one of his servants, you know, who has been serving him for 30-odd years, 38 years, now have to deal with this and have to suffer that? And also, when he retired, he started having all these health issues. And so, like, it was just like a big thing for me where I was just like, why would that happen? Which I think is what a lot of people in today's day and age kind of question or rationalize or wrestle with.
Yeah, the problem of evil. Yeah,
And
suffering. Yeah, so it's a real struggle.
It's a real struggle, yeah. And I think that for me, I kind of resulted to, like I said, those supplements to kind of ease the pain. And then, like I said, that one night in particular that I remember, I was just, you know, getting sick profusely. And there came a point where I thought to myself in my mind, why am I doing this? Why am I doing all of this? Like, why am I self-destructing? Why am I putting myself in this position thinking that this is going to save me? It's doing the opposite. Like, I don't feel better. I don't feel like I'm achieving things or anything. Like, I'm just drowning at this point. And so I remember I had finally like got myself, you know, from being hungover and all sort of stuff. And I started really having like internal questions and asking myself really deep, thought-provoking things. But the biggest thing that I had asked myself was, is God even real? And so I ended up later that day, searching up on YouTube, is God even real?
You literally,
I literally looked up on YouTube, is God even real? Those were the exact words.
So what comes up?
Greg Laurie.
Wow.
First
what
video.
A trip. Shout out to Pastor Greg and the SEO team over there, huh?
Yeah.
Someone over there is doing some good work.
Yeah.
What year is this?
This is in 2021. 2021. I look up, is God even real? It gives me chills just thinking about it right now. And the first video I watch is Pastor Greg. And it's so funny because...
And you knew that was the pastor.
I knew it was him, and I was like, oh, this is so weird. Pastor Greg, you know, I used to go to his church and, you know, worship there and all sorts of stuff. So I click on the video, and I'm listening to it, and I can't, for the life of me, of course, like I can't remember what the video was, what the topic was that he was talking about. But whatever that was, whatever that video was, it clicked. It all clicked. Everything that he was saying, everything that he was just preaching about, it all clicked. It's like everything that was unclear, everything that was foggy, everything that could ever be anything of uncertainty, it all made sense now. And so I was like, you know what? I like the way that this is making me feel. I feel convicted to continue this. So every single day at lunch, I would watch a Pastor Laurie video. Every lunch. You know, I would get food, and I would just sit in my room, and I would watch it. And this time, in 2021, there was, you know, in the industry, there was nothing happening. If you were getting auditions, I mean, you were literally, you know, praising God at that point, because truly there was nothing happening. And so there was like a pocket in time where if I had to guess at that point too, like that was another reason why I was kind of self-destructing, was because I had so much time on my hands. There was no auditions happening. So like, you know, I wasn't able to like really apply myself. There wasn't anything that I could really be practicing, or I mean, I could have, but I just wasn't. I just like kind of like utilized that as an excuse. And so now that I had all the time in the world, now I started putting that towards Pastor Laurie and, you know, studying every lunch. And so there came a point where it was like about like a month, I would say, like a month to the day, where all of a sudden, you know, I'm watching these videos and stuff. And then one day I get an email. And I get an email for an audition. And I get an audition that says, you know, the subject lines usually are like Nick Alvarez self-tape for appointment. And then it'll say the name. And I look at the appointment name and it says The Jesus Revolution. And then I go, first off, in my entire career of me auditioning, and I've done tens of thousands of auditions at this point, I've never even auditioned for anything faith-based.
Wow.
And anything at all in my entire career. And I've been doing this for 10 plus years now. Not once. And that's the first thing, let alone even have the word Jesus in the title. And I was like, that's odd. And so then I keep scrolling more, and I, you know, go down, and it, you know, it starts telling you the different things, the character, you know, description, has the script attached, all this different stuff. And then it has a summary or a log line at the very bottom. And then it says, based on the true life story of Pastor Greg Laurie back in the 1960s and the hippie era, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, there is no way. And in that moment, it came full circle for me
Yeah.
on the question that I asked on YouTube. And even I was asking myself of, is God even real?
Yep.
And it felt like God was kind of slightly like nudging me and going, do you believe me now? And that was for me like that moment where if there was any moment where I didn't have faith, now I did. And that really solidified it for me. And so to kind of make things short, I ended up auditioning for that. It was for Pastor Greg's best friend, who, funny enough, and it's so funny how God works too, because like I was going through such a bad time with drugs and drinking and all this different stuff. That character was dealing with the same thing. And that was exactly the same exact thing. So I didn't even have to act. It was just me. It was just me remembering what I went through. And so it was so crazy because I remember at that time, like I felt like really in tune, like with God, even though like I hadn't like really like proclaimed like Jesus is Lord and like, you know, I'm really going to do that or even get baptized or any of that kind of stuff. Like I felt really, you know, at peace. I felt really like whole. I felt great, like the best I've ever felt in my entire life. And so when we get to this point where now I'm having like a couple of days to kind of marinate on the material and stuff like that, I'm thinking to myself, because like it was like 3 scenes and it was like a lot, because like the last scene is with like me with Greg and he sees me homeless, begging for change. And I'm like on methamphetamine. And I was like, man, like this is like really heavy. And I was like, I don't even know what I'm going to do for this. And so leading up to the day that I knew that I was going to have to tape it, I woke up early in the morning. I took my dog outside to the backyard and it was like 6 in the morning. And like I said, I was really in tune with God. And this is where I'm saying like there's all these like weird, like full circle moments that happened for me in my life where like I was telling you about. For me, like my grandfather always said like that he always could hear the voice of God. I had felt in that moment when I was out there with my dog, like I was like thinking to myself, like, God, like what am I gonna do? Like what am I gonna do with this? I don't even know where to begin with this level of preparation or work that I'm gonna have to do right now for this. And all of a sudden I felt like I heard, look at the floor. So I looked at the floor and there was just a bunch of dirt in front of me. And then I felt that I heard, grab that dirt and put it all over yourself. I was like, grab the dirt and put it all over it. Why the heck am I, at 6 in the morning, why the hell am I going to grab some dirt right now and put it all over myself? I don't know what it was, but I just did it. Anyway, I grabbed it. I smeared it all over myself. And it all made sense because the very first scene that I ended up started filming was the scene of me begging for change. And I basically was like immersing myself into that role by doing that and taking that charge of like, I'm going to put all that dirt on myself, not make myself look like some pretty actor or some picture perfect thing. And that's what I started. And to this day, if I was to ever try to replicate that performance, there's no way I could be able to do that.
So what was that like working on that film?
Well, I didn't end up working on it.
Okay.
But what the thing was about all of that was the start of my faith.
Okay.
And
so you auditioned for it.
So I auditioned for it.
But you didn't get the role.
Yeah, but
Interesting.
But here's
I was sitting here the whole time thinking, I don't remember seeing you.
I know.
I saw that movie like 3 times. So I was like, wait. And then I'm like, maybe he wasn't it. And I just wasn't paying attention. Okay, so you auditioned, but you didn't get it.
So I didn't get it. But this was the crazy thing. So the crazy thing with that was that I had, you know, put myself on tape for it and all that stuff, sent off the audition, and then I had continued to keep doing what I was doing. I was still watching those videos of Pastor Greg Laurie and all that stuff. And one night, maybe 2 weeks later, I'm a heavy sleeper. I like knock out, and like if a burglar comes in, good luck. Like I ain't gonna save anybody. I was like dead asleep at like 3 or 4 in the morning. I woke up magically. And I felt another voice say to me, get on your hands and knees right now and pray for the Jesus revolution. And so I was like, okay. And so I like kind of was like all groggy and I was like, okay. And so I got on my hands and knees on the floor and I was like, I pray for the Jesus revolution in Jesus' name, amen. And I went back and sleep. Another 2 weeks goes by, still watching Pastor Greg, all this different stuff. There's another day where I'm taking my dog to, I forget where I was taking him, to like go get groomed or something like that, watching Pastor Greg. And all of a sudden, I get an email in my inbox saying that you're going to chem read for the Jesus Revolution. And that basically means that it's between you and maybe one or two other actors, and you're going to read opposite of the other actor who's playing Greg Laurie, which was, I forget the individual's name who plays Pastor Greg.
He did a great job, though.
He did a great job.
We got, hold on, I got to look this dude up to give him his props.
I forget his name.
Joel Courtney.
Joel Courtney, yeah.
Yes.
I was going to do a chemistry read with him for that. And so that for me was such a defining moment, like also because it also showed me that like I wasn't in control of that, like at all. Like if anything, I was so out of control. And I really trusted like God on that one. And it's just crazy that like that even produced that kind of result. And, you know, I got to do that, you know, chem read with Joel, you know, I got to meet John Irwin, a lot of those guys and stuff like that. And it was a really cool thing. Obviously it didn't go my way, but it was a really interesting thing because it kind of, it was a bigger defining moment for me where God was pointing at me that he is the one who provides. He is the one who makes these things possible, but you have to fully trust. And it was like the whole start of this journey of me having to trust. And like, I think that like for me, it wasn't even about me getting the Jesus Revolution. It was more so about me being placed in front of God in the presence of him and then being able to now take those tools and now apply them for the remainder of my life. And so...
Yeah, I mean, I would say the cool part is that God met you where you were at. Like God met you in where you were at, in the things you were passionate and interested about with your career, and showed himself that like, no, I'm real. And I'm gonna make all these little things happen that aren't gonna make sense. And you're actually not gonna get what you want. You're not gonna get the part, but you're gonna know that I'm real because there's no way all of that could have been orchestrated, you know, randomly.
And it's crazy too, because like from like my whole career too, like has been like such a whirlwind of emotions because like I've done a lot of, you know, great things, don't get me wrong, but like there's always been, prior to me finding Christ, like there's always been a piece of me that's never felt satisfied with what I've done because I've always wanted, you know, more recognition or, you know, at least a level of understanding of knowing how much work I put into this. Because I know the work that I have put into it, and I've done, you know, a lot of extensive work. And so I think that there was always been a piece of me of that, but it was like this weird release where like, it was like, you can do all that. You can find peace through that with me.
That's good.
And so I think that like that was one of the biggest things that like I had to like kind of start to learn. It wasn't right then and there, but it was that process of where that finally got me to this point right now where I'm at, where I can sit knowing that and like I can have that. But then it starts to develop even crazier too after that, because right after that, like to kind of further my point about like me feeling like I was never like, I guess enough in a way. I would always do these like small like roles, and I would always do like these things with, you know, one line, whatever like that, and you know, see me, and you know, nobody, you know, everybody would kind of forget. And I had this opportunity that had came into my court like maybe like a month or two after, and I was kind of wrestling with this whole idea of like, man, I didn't get the Jesus Revolution and all this different stuff, and I was kind of like, you know, down in my dump, you know, I was down on my luck on that, and I ended up getting this random untitled project. Like they didn't say anything, they just kept it all hush hush, you know, project that came into my court, and I was going to be doing this scene, you know, with some, you know, unknown actor. And so I put myself on tape for it, and I ended up booking it, and I was like, oh man, like not again like this thing like, oh man, like I'm having to do another scene, but it was one of those things where I was kind of like, you know, like, okay, like I guess this is like what I'm supposed to be doing. I guess I have to trust God on this one. And what I ended up finding out was I was going to work alongside with Steve Carell.
Okay.
And for me growing up, I have a comedy background. And so comedy for me is like, you know, the ultimate thing. And so Steve Carell has always been like one of the guys that I always wanted to work with, along with Will Ferrell and with, you know, Jim Carrey's like probably like my guy of all, but like some of these, you know, iconic people who have like done comedy, like he was definitely one up there for me that like really just, it was like one of those moments where like God was like, it felt like for me, like God was kind of like telling me like, I can utilize you in the spaces that you want to be in, but it fully comes down to you surrendering and trusting in me. In all of that. And I wasn't getting it at that point, but it was like slowly but surely starting to kind of happen. And so it was really interesting too, because I also felt like it was like another moment where like God was also kind of showcasing to me as well. Like I got to see how Steve operated on set and how he was operating with the directors, how he was operating with the producers, how he was like manhandling that, being the number one on the show and being the number one on the call sheet. Like, he was not being disrespectful. He was not being, you know, a jerk off. He was not being, you know, like, hey, you assistant, go get me some water or, you know, whatever like that. And he was also being super collaborative. He was asking a bazillion questions to the director and all sorts of stuff. And I was like, this is really crazy because like we always, you know, as actors who maybe we think ourselves like kind of as smaller, like we're not doing the same level of work because they're Steve Carell or they're Denzel Washington or whoever it is. But the reality is we're doing the same exact stuff they are. And it was kind of like a mirrored image where I got to kind of see like there's a lot of process in which that I do where I ask myself a lot of questions about my characters or different things of that nature that is no much different than that. And so I think that it was also like another teachable moment that like God allowed me to be able to kind of see as well, where it's like, stop putting those people on a pedestal and you so far beneath them, like as if you're not equal to them just because they're a name and you're not. And so I think that that was also another big thing for me as well that kind of allowed me to kind of be able to see that from that perspective.
So what was that project?
It was called The Patient.
The Patient. Okay.
Yeah, and it's
Let's see if I've heard of it.
Basically the whole premise is like Steve Carell has like he's like a therapist and he has like a couple of patients that he's dealing with. And he has one particular patient in particular, which is Donald Gleason. She's phenomenal. And he's a little bit kookier than the rest of them. And he ends up trapping him in his basement. And it's like this whole like psychological thriller and all that kind of stuff. So I was one of his like patients that he was dealing with to set up the show and stuff like that. But yeah, it was just, it was crazy how that whole thing had kind of happened. And then after that, I would say what was really, really interesting was it also kind of was a humbling thing too, because it was God showcasing to me as well that like this whole idea that I thought of like me getting to work on big films or shows or this and that, like was going to be the thing that would sustain me in life. And shortly after The Patient, I was really, you know, getting in my word. I was really now at this point in my faith starting to actually pick up the Bible and like read scripture myself and understanding it and applying it and doing all that kind of stuff. And it was leading me to trusting really into God. But the biggest thing that it was making me do was I was actually having a lot of internal like wrestling matches with God. It kind of felt like Jacob in a way of me having to kill my ego. And that was one of the biggest things that I had. And there came a point where I finally had to say, after that whole experience with Jesus Revolution, The Patient, where I finally like wrestled with God and I was like, okay, Lord, look, you are clearly making this seem to me that this is where I'm supposed to be. And I should continue to be in this profession. But I just say to you right now that if I never work a day in my life again, I'm content. I'm happy with where I'm at.
That surrender and that contentment is huge.
And I was wrestling with that for so long that I didn't want to say that. But then I finally got to a point where through reading scripture, through understanding him, I finally said, okay, Lord, like you're in control. You are in the driver's seat, and I will let you reign over my life. And so that was a pretty defining moment for me, because then at that point, my approach to everything started to shift. And for 10 plus years, I've been trying for so long to do things my way. And the minute that I let all that go, God changed my whole story. And in ways that I never thought. So I ended up auditioning for a commercial that I ended up getting. And my luck for commercials have always been bad. Like, I had booked a Diego Luna commercial where he was directing for like one of the World Cups back in 2014 for the Spanish network. Did nothing. They didn't even do it. They didn't even air it. I had a Super Bowl commercial. They had everybody in the final cup except for me. Like, I've had like all just this bad luck with like these commercials. And finally this one I ended up booking. It was with Slash. And it was a Capital One commercial, played for a whole year. And in my entire 10 plus year career, it was the most amount of money I've ever made when I was trying to do things on my own strength.
For a Capital One commercial.
For a Capital One commercial.
Interesting.
That God just provided and just laid it right there for me. And I'm making it seem like simpler than what it was, but I mean, like, the reality of it was, it felt so seamless how it all happened, because now I was like letting everything go, and I was just able to now truly kind of enjoy the art now. I was able to enjoy the craft, and I was able to go into these rooms and be like, hey, what's going on? You know, and just kind of just enjoy the process of it all. And then that then led to another commercial. And then I booked another commercial. And now I was like sitting on money that I could have never even imagined even making. And again, from sources that I never thought I would ever make that from. I was thinking that I was going to make it on this big movie or this big show or whatever like that. And now here I'm making it with these commercials in the oddest ways. And I think that's how God works, is that he's doing it like, okay, great. Now that you fully surrendered to me, now I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to show you. It's going to be in the most unorthodox like way possible. And I love that he did that, because I think that it really kept me humble at heart within the whole process. And then within that, that was a whole crazy thing too, because then once that whole thing happened, I had heard a couple of years prior to from some family friends that there was going to be these houses being built in another state. And that they were going to be moving to another state to go work on a series, and that they were like, you know, Netflix is acquiring some land out there. They're building a lot of properties out there. We're thinking of, you know, settling down and getting a property out there. And I was like, you know, I've always kind of like wanted to like be diverse with my money and just like my earnings and stuff like that, and not like kind of have it like work for me, as opposed to just like letting it sit and do nothing. And just also expand my worldview and knowledge of just understanding like, how can I, you know, better myself. And I think that there came a point where now with me sitting on all this lump of money, I was kind of getting scared with it, because I had never seen this amount of money in my life before. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I think I'm going to just like blow all this, and I don't want to do that. And so I ended up circling around with those family friends that I knew and asked them, hey, so remember those houses you were talking about? What's the deal with them? He's like, oh my gosh, they're, you know, building all this land and blah, blah, blah. You should come out a weekend. Come stay with us for a weekend and come take a look at the properties. So I did. I flew out. And so we ended up, you know, going out there and looking at the land and all that stuff. And man, it was just a whole other world being like displayed in front of me. But the craziest thing about it was that like it really felt to me like God was showing me a vision. And it was so interesting, because at that point in time I was reading Moses. And I was reading the whole story about the promised land. And I was really getting like deep into that. And a lot of the things that were kind of resonating with me were this whole idea of him grabbing the Israelites from Egypt and sending them to another place that they all don't know where they're going to go, but it's going to be for their better good.
Mm-hmm.
And it really felt like that's what he was kind of doing with me in a way, and pulling me out of Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really interesting because I never thought that that would be even feasible, especially at this point in my career, because I think when I got those commercials, I was 22, 23, and me thinking I'm going to get a house at that age, it was absurd. Like,
but from your framework, you were also like, hey, I just want to park some money somewhere so I could have my housing expenses settled and I don't have to worry about where I'm going to live. That's probably your...
Well, that, and also just from the perspective of too, like, I also wanted my money to kind of like grow for me, you know, and also not have to like put it at the expense of like me having to rent a place and then it's just going to waste. And
because Los Angeles and Orange County is expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive, you know, and I'm sure even out here too, it's crazy, you know, it's just for the land itself. I mean, good luck trying to go get a house for anything less than $800,000. That's not a shack, you know, it's just, it's awful. And so I think that it was really interesting how he was kind of like planting these like seeds in my life. And it was all like in a way to kind of like have me grow up and start to develop me into a man. And it was just really crazy how that all kind of started to happen, because then I went out there, saw the places, and I really fell in love with them. And I was like, wow, this is really awesome. Like I never thought in a million years that I would be here, or at this point in my life, I thought I'd be 30s, you know, that I'd be getting my first home and stuff like that. But now being able to park my money somewhere is, you know, an amazing thing. And so then one thing kind of led to another, and I started signing papers, and next thing you know, here I am. Yeah, buying a whole home.
How long ago was this?
This was a year ago this month.
Oh, that's awesome.
April.
I would assume they kind of, if you know John Irwin and Dallas are friends, you're kind of in this circle.
Yeah.
And so how did the opportunity to audition come up?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, like, it's weird because yes, that does happen, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. And also it's because, you know, I didn't work on Jesus Revolution. So it's not like I have like a true relationship with John in that kind of way. But, you know, I had, you know, moved out, and it's so crazy because there's so many lessons that I think that God has just taught me, like in this whole process of like me doing this. But like, there was I felt like Paul, honestly, because like when he says that, you know, like, I've been able to learn how to live with a lot of means and nothing. And I've been able to be content with both.
That's
like,
right.
I feel like I've truly embodied that, like in like the last year.
Yeah.
Like, it's the craziest
I think
thing.
you have to, as any type of creative entrepreneur, artist, you have to know how to live on very little, and then know how to handle when there's increase, because it's often a roller coaster. It's a very up and down income.
Yeah, no, totally, 1,000,000%. It's just crazy how he's kind of like showcased that, and how, you know, you have to keep humility, but also that trust in him that he's going to provide no matter what. And so I think it's crazy because I had all that lump sum of money, and the next thing you know, here I am signing all these papers, and now all that money just goes, and I'm like, what just happened? And I had something, like I had something to secure me. But then there came a point where, like, you know, I started seeing even that dwindle away, you know, and that's going and going and going and going. And there came a point where a really good buddy of mine had ended up saying, listen, man, you know, like, I know you're kind of like starting to like, you know, freak out about the money and stuff like that. He was like, I've been there too. He was like, I would look in the mirror. He's like, I know this sounds crazy, but he was like, I would look in the mirror and I would say this scripture back. And he's like, and I would personalize it for myself, like as like affirmation that the Lord's going to provide. And he's like, I would look in the mirror and say, my God will meet all my needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. And that's one of the scriptures, I believe, in 2 Corinthians, I believe. And he was like, I would do that. And he was like, and all of a sudden money would start flowing out of nowhere. And he's like, I would do that. He was like, I know it sounds weird. He goes, I know it's also like a weird thing because you're not wanting to ask God for those kinds of things. He's like, but it's through the level of faith that you have that you will develop that. And so I was just like, to be honest, I felt guilty. I felt guilty asking God for more money. Like I felt like a fraud. I felt like that was stupid. And so I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And so there was a piece of me that kind of like didn't do it. But then I would like wake up in the morning and stuff like that because I started to see my bank account starting to like deplete and deplete. And I was like, okay, maybe I got to do this. And so I kind of started doing it. I was like, okay. I would look in the mirror and I'd be like, my God would meet all my needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. But I wouldn't like really believe it. And so I would kind of like keep doing it and doing it and doing it. A couple days started turning into weeks. And I started doing that. And then it started leading to me changing my heart posture altogether. And I started praying on my hands and knees and like truly like just surrendering. And I started doing that. In that time period when I finally moved, I had an audition once. And it was such a weird thing because it wasn't like it was like how it was back in like the COVID time where like there was nothing happening or whatever like that. There was like, you know, good stuff. It just, for whatever reason, it was just dead. And I had been praying about that. I've been praying, you know, my God will meet all my needs according to the riches of glory in Christ Jesus. And all of a sudden, one day I was building furniture in my house and I ended up leaving. I went on a walk to go get some food and I'm walking and I get a phone call and it's my manager's assistant and he's like, hey, I got some good news for you. And I'm like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, like, I have an audition in like 2 months. What good news do we have? And he's like, I couldn't contain my excitement anymore, you know, any longer because, you know, I found out first and nobody's supposed to know this, but I just wanted to call you and tell you because, you know, I know you've, you know, haven't gotten much work, you know, lately. And so I want to be the first one to tell you. And I was like, okay, like just spit it out. Like, what is it? And he was like, you booked The Chosen. And I was like,
wait, did you audition for it?
I did. But the crazy thing was that I had auditioned for it like 5 months ago when I was back in LA. And I had been just, you know, sending in all these auditions, all these tapes and stuff like that. And you send them out and it's like to the ether. And like then what ends up happening with them, you have no idea. And especially now with this whole new day and age of self-taping, which is basically you know, it's pretty self-explanatory, but you just put yourself on tape and you just submit it out.
You're not going out and
you're
reading
not
it
actually
somebody.
going in person anymore and reading like how it used to be. And you could be anywhere in the world. You know, there's people I know that are in New York. There's people in, you know, just all over the world, you know, submitting tapes. And the competition is so fierce now. You know, it's just so worldwide that it's even more scarce. But I mean, beyond all of that, it was so crazy because something that I had auditioned for 5 months ago, I didn't even remember what it was. So when he said it, he goes, you booked The Chosen. I was like, oh, Mark. And then,
now, were you a fan of The Chosen at this point or not
so
really?
I knew about The Chosen, but I never had really dived into it. I had never seen it. I'd seen like little bits and pieces of it and stuff like that. People, you know, friends of mine who were, you know, of faith and stuff like that had, you know, told me about it and stuff like that. But I never really had seen it. And it was just so funny because then I then get submersed into this. And even going...
So you had to binge watch all the...
I binge watched the whole thing prior to
What was your favorite season prior to getting on set?
For sure. For sure.
I like the walking on water, feeding 5,000.
Yeah, I think that was season 3.
And I think it's the finale of season 3.
Yeah.
I thought that was spectacular.
Look, I think that what Dallas has done is phenomenal. I mean, it's pretty revolutionary. I mean, honestly, like I feel like this day and age of like, I mean, even kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier about like the whole media landscape, like just like what they've been able to build like over these last couple of years, it's just pretty phenomenal. And obviously now with John doing, you know, House of David and stuff like that.
Amazon Prime behind everything. It's great.
Like it's really cool to kind of see like that they're really taking notice of like faith-based projects and that it's like a legitimate market.
Yeah, so your character on The Chosen is John Mark, who writes the Gospel of Mark. And the way he incorporates it is through the Mark 14 scene where they're going to find a house of the man they're going to have, whose house they're going to have the Last Supper with.
Supper.
Yeah. And so Dallas kind of takes some creative liberty and basically your character, John Mark, that it's his dad's house, it's your house, that the disciples come. And I'm assuming that's how the connection starts. Well, I don't know how much you're going to get ahead in John. But I know people believe that John Mark wrote his gospel with Peter's insight. You know, like Peter. So I'm assuming, is that kind of where the story is going, where you're getting closer to Peter, or like, yeah. So anyway, go ahead. I don't want to.
No.
Unnecessary spoilers on my part.
No. You're good. No. Yeah. Right now it's not being set up that way.
Okay.
But we have speculated that would be at some point that would get incorporated. I know that like I did some like press junket for like The Chosen with Chris Durbin and those guys. And they had asked me, they were like, just asking me different questions. They were like, so do you think that Peter will get close with Mark and stuff like that? And I was like, yeah, I think so. I think, you know, Dallas does a really great job with the theologians to like really make this pretty biblically accurate. And I think that, you know, in terms of all of that, if we know that there's a belief and understanding that Mark wasn't really the one who kind of eyewitnessed it, but it was more so Peter, and he was just kind of more so documenting it all. Yeah, I think they would make sense. And also, you know, you can read in the whole correlation with it also is that they believe, because in Acts, there's a part in there where it says that Peter is the spiritual father of Mark. So there's like this whole tie there where, you know, they obviously have some type of bond that gets built. So when that happens, how that happens, I have no idea. That's
so you were in season 5, episode 7 and 8.
Yeah.
Are you going to be in season 6? Are they setting you up for that?
Yeah.
Do you know anything about that?
Yeah. Season 6.
Season 6.
We will be back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you guys started shooting that yet?
Yeah, they started on Monday.
Okay.
Yeah, they started on Monday.
Any idea how many episodes you're going to be in?
I don't. They're keeping everything a mystery even with me right now. But I know that. Yeah, we'll be back.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we'll be back.
That's fine. Okay, so what was it like working? I've been on set before, and
more fish.
Yeah, more fish.
We need more fish.
We need you to advocate for Dallas to give us the merchant spinoff. Yeah, he thinks I'm playing, but no, I'm kidding. I'm totally joking. But yeah, it was fun doing that. But being on set is like, bro, it's a lot of work. It's it's a lot of hurry up and wait.
Yeah,
sitting around, and then everyone's up.
How long were you there for?
How long were we there for? I mean, we were there for like a full day. But I would say on set for maybe 45 minutes. And it was cool from one standpoint because we got a tour of everything, but we were actually watching them film some of the stuff.
What did you get to watch the film?
We got to watch them film the guy who was the high priest coming to betray Jesus, I think, or like coordinating with who is the ruler, Zach? The young guy, Pontius Pilate, and the older high priest guy, Caiaphas. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we saw those that back and forth. We were there while they were filming that.
Wow.
And it was cool because you're looking on the screen and it's like, this is a Netflix show being made in real time, right? So like it looks crazy high quality, but it's being made in real time, and then they're stopping. But I was just watching it from just a standpoint of like just a time to get everything just right. I was like, gosh, man, this is a crazy amount of just work and meticulous work.
Yeah. It's really crazy just to kind of like see all that. I mean, I've always been like a geek for that. Like just even getting to like watch not even my scenes, but just, you know, everybody else's, because I think that you learn from all of that, you know. I think that also, like, you know, one of the greatest things for me being a part of The Chosen is that like there's a whole personal element, you know, for me that I've never had or gotten the chance to experience on any of the other projects, because, you know, this does have faith, and I'm so tied to my faith now that it means everything to me.
So it seems like, would it be fair to say like this is kind of the best case scenario for you, where your faith is involved, you can do your craft, you're around great people,
totally,
and you're making something that's meaningful.
Yeah, no, 1,000,000%. I think that it's one of those things where I couldn't ask for anything better. I think that this is one where I get to really dive into not only just like from an actor's point of view, you know, the art of it all, but also on a spiritual level, I have to be in tune with God in terms of the accurate portrayal of John Mark and the responsibility behind that as well, you know, because there's so many people that are watching this that are, you know, I mean, look, there's going to be haters. There's going to be people that are going to, you know, talk smack about it and stuff like that. But there's also a lot of people that also kind of take this seriously, you know, to supplement the Bible. And so I really want to make sure that, you know, my portrayal of John Mark, of what we know of John Mark, is as accurate as I possibly can, you know, do, God willing.
Any chance you're going to be in the Acts spinoff whenever they do that?
I don't know.
Would you be open for that?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
1,000,000%.
I think that when I talk to people on the ground, like people are like, cool, like Moses, Joseph, like all that stuff is fire. But I think people are really like, oh, what would the book of Acts look like? You know?
To be honest with you, I'm so geeked for even the Joseph and the Moses series.
Yeah.
I mean, Dallas, I would love to be a part of it. But yeah, I mean, personally, you know, like it's also cool too, because like for me, like those were even stories that I first started reading in scripture. Like when I first started submersing myself into scripture, like those were the stories, like, you know, Joseph and Moses and Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, like all those ones. And I resonate, Job, I resonate with all of those so heavily. And just being able to get to see that come to life, like, you know, I mean, there's so many stark differences between The Chosen and even House of David, but even getting to watch, you know, I've been loving House of David, what John Irwin's been doing with that. And like, it's just like, it's Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Like it's Game of Thrones, but now just set in the...
It's crazy how much good stuff that's being made right now, man.
Yeah.
That's honoring Jesus and God. It's fire, man. I'm excited to see where your character goes in season 6.
Yeah.
Season 6 is, I'm assuming, going to be pretty rough in terms of what's coming.
Yeah.
And how are you mentally getting ready for that?
The biggest thing that I've just been thinking about for me is, because a lot of it is a mystery right now. I don't even really know what the involvement is. I mean, one can kind of assume that where we leave off with John Mark is in the garden, or sorry, he's leaving to go to the garden. We leave off season 5 in the garden where Judas kisses Jesus, and that's where we finish the season. So I believe that, you know, there's going to now be the continuation of that, Peter slicing off the ear, you know, all that kind of chaos that ends up happening, him finally getting arrested, and then John Mark probably like coming in there and sneaking off, because he there's like a whole moment there at the very end where we, you know, see him, he sneaks off, he hears them in the upper room, and then he goes and follows them. So it would be the continuation of that, and then anything else that they have, you know, in store for that. So
that's fire, man. I can't wait to see it, brother.
Yeah.
We got to have you back, man. I want to go
no.
deeper, especially as more and more stuff comes out. And hopefully I'll get to go on set when you guys get a little deeper into the story.
Yeah.
Hang with you guys. Thank you so much for doing this, Nick. I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, no, thanks, man.
All right, guys. We're going to get out of here. Peace. Brand new Occupy Till I Come 60-day devotional has arrived, taking you through the entire narrative of Scripture in 60 days, 35 days in the Old Testament, 25 days in the New Testament, with custom interactive journal prompts for every single day. This is a great way to have a structured devotional, reignite your passion for the Word of God. This is something I wish I had 20 years ago, 10 years ago, when I was traveling a lot doing music, that could just take me through a general narrative of Scripture and help me be interactive and reflect on what it is that I read. That is why there's a journal built into the devotional with daily prayer request section to also document my prayers. So whether you've been walking with Jesus for a while or you're new to the faith, go to blessgod.shop right now to pick it up. All right, I'll see you over there. After the incredible success of our Bless God prayer journal, many of you guys began to ask for something that had a planner. And so we combined our Bless God prayer journal with a brand new leadership planner that jam-packs the same things from our prayer journal with a planner, goal setting, leadership meeting, and notes. With the next pages, you can see different sections right along here of this leadership planner, where you can start out with actionable goals, 12 months of calendar, our original prayer journal prompts, our leadership journal with the proven problem solution framework, and of course, just free write notes. This leadership planner is based off of Matthew 25:14-30, which of course is the parable of the talents. The vision of the planner is to help you make the most of your time, talent, and treasure. Head over to blessgod.shop and get yours.